Hi, this is my final project for UCLA Cartography 167. For this project I made 3 maps detailing state oil production, consumption, and deficit/surplus. I acquired my data from the CIA World Factbook that detailed the oil production and consumption for each state in 2013. To get the data for each country's oil deficit/surplus, I simply took total oil consumption and subtracted that from total oil production. Just as a side note, all the data was measured in barrels consumed on a daily basis.
The purpose of these 3 maps is to basically provide a visualization as to what countries are the world's largest or significant oil producers, consumers, and what countries are running a oil deficit or surplus. Why that's significant is it basically gives viewers a quick idea as to who is importing the most oil and who is exporting the most oil.
My first 2 maps, oil production by country and oil consumption by country, are made in a very similar way. Both were done using ArcGIS, and both used graduated symbology in order to convey the exact amount of oil that was produced and consumed in each country. In my first map, oil production by country, I used the natural breaks classification out of the realization that when using equal intervals, pretty much every single state, excluding the United States, Saudi Arabia, Canada, China, and Russia, fell into the lowest category. While this identifies the 5 key players in oil production, it fails to identify other oil producers around the world that might still be producing, but to a lesser extent. As you can see in the map that is presented to you that is using natural breaks, there are far more countries in the Middle East that produce oil. You can see some in Europe, primarily Norway, and some African countries and Latin American countries that are also producing a significant amount of oil. And using the equal intervals did not identify these countries as significant, and I found that to be a problem. Once again, for my second map, I used the natural breaks classification. This is because when using the equal interval, the same thing happened where pretty much every single country was put into the lowest category except China and the United States. And because of that, it failed to represent any other country that had any form of significant oil consumption or distinguish between them. And so once again, as you can see on this map, that there are far more countries that consume oil than just China and the United States as a significant level, including multiple countries throughout Europe and the Middle East and Canada and in Africa. And so because of that, the natural breaks proved to be a far better classification in which to visualize where oil consumption is occurring around the world. My third and final map details oil surplus/deficit per country, and this map I made on Tableau. Like my 2 prior maps, I used graduated symbology in order to convey the amount at which countries were in surplus or deficit. As you can see, I also used a diverging color scheme in order to identify which countries were net producers and net consumers of oil. As you can see, Russia and Saudi Arabia both produce far more oil than they consume, and hence they are depicted as black oil-producing countries. This means that they are the primary exporters to the world's oil economy.
In contrast, you have countries that are highlighted in red, and these countries are the ones that are running a net oil deficit. That means they are consuming more oil than they are producing domestically. And what that means is that they are more reliant on imports. You can see on the map that there are far more countries that are in a deficit than they are in a surplus. Therefore, many more countries are reliant on oil imports. The countries that are highlighted in gray are countries that are neutral, which means that they're producing about as much as they are consuming. One final thing that should be kept in mind when viewing these maps is that the data is 2 years old, so the amount of oil consumed, produced, and the net surplus or deficit of each country might have changed slightly over the last 2 years. But besides that, this is my project. I hope it provided some valuable information, and thank you for giving it a watch.